Thank you everyone for being here. We can get started with the class. Next slide, please. Gracias a todos por estar aquí hoy. Si quieren poner su nombre en el chat y por favor escoge el idioma que quieren escuchar esta sesión. Pueden escoger español o inglés. And just a reminder, this is our class site. We want you to check it out. We always have updates. We have the recorded lecture slides there and more information on our principles and our practice in the class. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, you will also find course information, information on our planning committee, information on the session, our instruction team, the syllabus, and other objectives. And this year, our focus is on how to build a world together. Next slide, please. Next slide. And just some class reminders is that as can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I just had an emergency with my pet, so I'm at the ER with him. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so just some quick class reminders. We also acknowledgement. Do want to give a warning around the content that some of the material may be difficult to discuss, and we also have importance around respectful conversations and taking care of ourselves during these lectures and things that may come up. We follow language justice and have live interpretation and Zoom controls. Thank you, Allison. So today we'll be on mute, and then when we want to ask a question, we'll just raise our hand and then we'll call on you. Next slide, please. And so here you can see our land acknowledgement. And here long must also acknowledge and understand how we can do right around the historical wrongings around colonization, state violence, and support Indigenous community struggles for self-determination and sovereignty. And in this Beyond Chicago, we recognize that occupied land and the persistence of settler colonialism through dispositions and displacement is an issue here and internationally. And we are seeing this in Gaza. Occupation.
I think we might have lost Yvette for a second. I'll pick up where she left off. Occupation is a public health crisis, and we should all be... Okay, you're back. I'll just finish the last sentence. And we should all be taking actions toward building a better possible world through supporting Indigenous communities.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm just gonna off camera so that maybe that helps. Next slide. We have some important community guidelines to acknowledge. We understand that this topic can bring up strong feelings, and so we want to keep in mind that we have guidelines as Radical Public Health Group, that we assume positive intention and take responsibility for impact, step up and step back and be aware how you take up space, speak from your own experience using I statements, And as we listen to understand and not to react, and challenge the idea and not the person. Also, just some precautions for class. We will issue a warning if you have participating in any offensive or inflammatory language through the chat. And we will also want to make sure that our name, how we have it listed in the Zoom, is correct as how we identify ourselves and no pseudonyms. And again, as I mentioned during the question and answer, if you would like to ask a question and get off mute, please raise your hand and we will enable you. But again, we ask that your Zoom profile feature your real name, as anonymous participants will not be called on. Next slide, please. And so today I have the great pleasure of introducing the Students for Justice in Palestine at UIC. We're very excited to have them here today. And so the Students for Justice in Palestine at UIC is a Palestinian-led student group organization that advocates for a free and liberated Palestine. SJP at UIC also recognizes the Palestinian liberation is not one-sided. Our movement is also aligned with the Black, queer, and Filipino liberation movements, as well as any oppressed group of people fighting for their liberation. We recognize that we are truly not free until we are all free. SJP at UIC has been organizing on campus for over 10 years. They host educational, solidarity, and cultural events to advocate for free and liberated Palestine. They also support and hold campaigns and protests on campus to advocate for a safer and more ethical space for all students. Currently, SJP has a campaign against the UIC School of Public Health for their contract they hold with the Jewish United Fund, a racist, Islamophobic, and transphobic organization. SJP at UIC recognizes that Palestine is a public health crisis and Zionism has no place in our curriculum. And with that, I present to you SJP. Thank you.
Hello, I am a board member of Students for Justice in Palestine. I'm here with
another board member from Students for Justice in Palestine, and we're really delighted to be here.
Yeah, we are so excited to be giving this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You guys could all see my screen, correct?
Yes, we could see.
Yes, we can see it.
Wait, I don't want to do this. Sorry, let me share. Okay, so we're gonna get into it. This is kind of going to be a longer presentation. There's a lot of material to cover, but stay tuned, listen, take notes, prepare questions for the end. And yeah, we're really excited. We did Epidemics of Injustice 2 years ago, revolving around like more of our campaign with against the School of Public Health, the UIC School of Public Health. This one is revolving more around like the history of Palestine and how Palestine is a public health crisis. So here we get into it. Epidemics of Injustice, Palestine is a public health issue. So let's go. Just a little disclaimer, kind of gonna reiterate what was said previously. Some of this material is hard to digest. It's important to keep an open mind and push yourself to learn. Questions are of course welcomed. Any clarification is welcomed. But note that I am not here. My partner is not here. We are not here to debate human rights, and we are not here to debate genocide. What we know is that what is happening in Palestine is genocide. It's illegal under international law. That is not up for debate. And there is no genocide deniers welcomed here. So let's get into it.
SJP, we still see a loading screen, just so you know. I'm not sure if you want to be.
Wait, what do you mean? Oh, my screen
Like we
sharing is.
see.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you
Yeah,
guys
it's
didn't
black
see
and
anything. Okay, wait,
no.
let me try to be sure.
And then
Okay.
also our interpreter has just let us know to try and slow the pace just a tiny bit. Thank you.
Okay, makes sense. Wait, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so again, just reiterating what I just said, material is hard to digest. Oop. Okay, wait, it's being very laggy on my part. Okay, perfect. This is our next slide. So what is the world we want to see built? I understand that this is kind of the theme around the class this semester. So the answer to this question will be provided as we move along the presentation. I'm guessing you guys can also infer what world we want to see built depending on like the content that we're sharing. But here are some ideas to keep in mind. Israeli settler colonialism is the root cause of Palestinian health disparities and genocide. Adequate and equitable healthcare cannot exist with occupation, settler colonialism, racial capitalism in Palestine and beyond, in America, anywhere else. These two ideas are mutually exclusive. They cannot coexist together. So moving on. So first, we're going to give a brief overview of Palestinian history. I want to make a disclaimer that Palestinian history is so deep. It's so, there's so much more that goes into it than what I'm about to share. But I am, of course, sharing with you guys important historical events. But of course, I urge you guys all to watch movies, read books, read articles, and do your own research into Palestinian history if this is something that you're interested in, want to learn more about. But this is kind of just going to give you the base for when we talk about Palestinian public health. So let's get into it. Oh, okay. So we're going to start off with the Nakba and British colonization. So let me start off with British colonization. Before the British colonized Palestine, Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire. So as we know, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire falls, European powers defeat the Ottoman Empire, and then they go into the Middle East and essentially break up these countries into different colonial boundaries. So Palestine goes to the British, Lebanon goes to Syria, for example. Lebanon goes to the French, Syria goes to the French, and then so on. So British colonization happens in Palestine, and the whole idea of British colonization during this time is there's a promise that Palestinians will be granted their own statehood. So the British are like, okay, we're here to prepare you guys to be able to run your own state, which is obviously a very Orientalist and racist idea, because Palestinians have been living there for centuries and they didn't need anyone to teach them how to run a state, especially the British. So that happens. Kind of simultaneously as this is happening, this political ideology of Zionism emerges. And the father of Zionism is a man named Theodor Herzl. He is a Jew himself. And basically, his idea to solve this Jewish problem in Europe, which is anti-Semitism, this anti-Semitism problem in Europe, is to essentially creates a Jewish state. And of course, his idea is pre-World War I. So his idea is late 1800s. And he proposes this idea to European officials as his way to solve this Jewish problem. So I'm looking at my notes. So moving on, this is the way to solve this, Jewish problem in Europe. So from the beginning of the 1900s, there is this immigration of European Jews to the land of Palestine. Again, as a way to solve this, Jewish problem and anti-Semitism. And of course, this idea was supported by European leaders because obviously they didn't want the Jews in Europe. They wanted to send them somewhere else. Anti-Semitism is a very deep-rooted issue in Europe that extends hundreds of years back. So this idea was supported by European leaders. So we see in the early 1900s, this influx of Jews going from Europe to Palestine and colonizing Palestine. And certain groups like the Jewish United Fund and the Jewish National Fund, which please remember these groups because we're going to go into this later, they start buying land in Palestine. So before World War I, they start buying land in Palestine for Jews, kind of as like this like early colonization thing. And then the Balfour Declaration is issued in 1917, essentially promising the land of Palestine to the Jewish people, saying that this can be their homeland. It's important to note when they were deciding what lands to give to, you know, these European Jews, they considered land in Africa and in South America. So this wasn't only something that was just singular to Palestine, but they ended up choosing Palestine because of its religious ties to the Jewish faith. So then, you know, World War I ends. You have this influx of Jews into Palestine, but you still have the indigenous Palestinian populations living there and residing there. So between the 1920s and the 1930s, we see this influx of these Arab and Palestinian revolts. And of course, these revolts were in response to British colonization and these incoming Zionist settlers. British colonization, as it is anywhere, is violent, and these revolts lasted years. So in response to these revolts, the British issue something called the White Papers, and the White Papers essentially promised the land to the Palestinians. So here you have the Balfour Declaration, and then you also have the White Papers promising one land to two different groups of people. And then, of course, these Arab revolts continue until the 1940s. And then you hit May 14th, 1948. And then this is essentially when Israel is declared a state. This is when the Israeli state takes over Palestine. You have 750,000 Palestinians displaced, which was 80% of the indigenous population. Many of them fleeing to Gaza, the West Bank, being internal refugees, and then also many of them fleeing north to Lebanon, and then northeast to Syria. So during the Nakba, you have 530 villages destroyed, 15,000 Palestinians murdered. And just to kind of paint you a picture of what some of the scenes looked like during the Nakba, you have men who are murdered in front of their families. Honestly, not just men, children, women, elderly. Women are raped. Children are thrown into ovens or fires. The Nakba was violent, as all colonization is. The colonization of Palestine was an armed colonial effort. So like guns were involved and stuff like that. And then this is also where we see the Deir Yassin massacre. This is one of the most well-known massacres during the Nakba. It was very violent, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I'll show some examples. And essentially, May 14th, 1948, the British withdraw from Palestine. They say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this problem anymore because, you know, they promised the land to two different groups of people. I don't want to deal with this problem anymore. We're going to hand this issue off to the UN and they're going to deal with it. So that's essentially what they did. They went to Palestine, they ruined it, made a bunch of promises, and then they were like, you know what, not my problem. I don't care. This is too much. I'm gone. So that's essentially where we see the first two-state solution, and I'll show a picture of what that looks like later. So yeah. Okay, just to kind of give you guys some examples of what this looks like. On the left to the map, you see a 1944 map. So this is pre-Nakba. This is pre the foundation of the Israeli states. This is land registered in Jewish possession. So you could see a lot of land, along the coast by the Mediterranean, and then of course the Sea of Galilee and stuff like that. This top picture right here of the man and then the tents behind him, this is a refugee camp after the Nakba. The Palestinian refugee crisis is the worst refugee crisis in modern history. Just a fun fact. The picture below is a picture of the British colonization of Palestine. So you see British men checking Palestinian men for like weapons and stuff like that, searching them and stuff. And then the last picture is you see a Palestinian Women's March in Jerusalem in 1933. And then this was part of like those Arab revolts. I want to make it very clear that Palestinian women hold a very high place in Palestinian resistance. And it's clear that they have held this position pre-1948. So they've been protesting occupation and colonialism pre-1948, pre the Nakba. And of course, we'll talk a lot more about that when we get into what the Intifada is. So yeah. And this is just a quote from the Deir Yassin massacre. It says, "They took us out one after the other, shot an old man, and when one of his daughters cried, she was shot too. Then they called my brother Muhammad and shot him in front of us. And when my mother yelled, bending over him, carrying my little sister Hudra in her hands, still breastfeeding her, they shot her too." So the Deir Yassin massacre was a very violent massacre. And this, I think, just shows a really, a very awful picture of like what that looked like. Of course, back then, the genocide wasn't like filmed. Phones didn't exist, obviously. But now we see those similar images coming out of what's happening in Gaza. So when I think of like, what was the Nakba like? I look at these videos of what I see happening in Gaza and I was like, this is what it looked like, which just is crazy to me. So yeah. Next, we see, actually, okay, I'm gonna show you this map first to the left. So this is historic Palestine, pre-colonization. And then this is in 1948/1947. This is when the British were like, okay, we don't want to deal with Palestine anymore. So the UN partitioned a plan. The green is the Palestinian state, and then the white is the Israeli state. So this is what the UN gave to Palestine. Okay, I'm going to go back. Going off of that, after the UN partitioned Palestine in 1948, the Palestinian or Arab territories went under Jordanian control. But there was still a sense of like that Israeli colonization and presence there. So between 48 and 67, the 6-Day War, 1967 is when the 6-Day War happened. There was even more land theft, more killings, murders, stuff like that. So obviously, yeah, let me just get into it. So Israel, the 6-Day War started because Israel attacked Egypt. They attacked Egypt under the assumption that Egypt was going to like attack them. So they attacked Egypt first, but Egypt wasn't going to attack them. That's just what they say. So it was fought by Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Israel. Obviously, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan being on one team, and then Israel being on in its own entity. Israel ended up winning this war, and they captured the Syrian Golan Heights, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the Sinai Peninsula. So the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and these Palestinian territories that were already under Jordanian rule are now under Israeli rule in 1967. 300,000 Palestinians are displaced, many of them fleeing to Jordan. And so on. Okay. And then this is again just another how it looked, another picture of how it looked. So in 1967, you see here the West Bank is now under Israeli control, and then the Gaza Strip. And you could also see how the West Bank and the Gaza Strip shrunk. So there's less Palestinian land. And then today in 2020, you see how small the West Bank has gotten and how small the Gaza Strip has gotten. And this is technically all Palestinian territory now. And then here's another visual of the 6-Day War. So they captured the Golan Heights, which Israel still has possession over. And they have possession over the Golan Heights because of water. It's a water resource for them, essentially. They captured the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and then the Sinai Peninsula, which is important because of the Suez Canal, and so on. Okay, moving on. So now we get into the intifadas, the uprisings. Intifada means uprising. sorry to go back, the Naksa means like setback. So yeah. So the first and second Intifada. The first Intifada was from 1987 to 1993. What caused this was just like rising tensions. And I think what was like, you know, the tip of the iceberg, which caused it, was the killing of 4 Palestinian men in Gaza. It was like 4 Palestinian men were hit by a Israeli man in a car. And that is just kind of when these Palestinian uprisings happened. So between these years, over 1,000 Palestinians were murdered and over 130 Palestinians were injured by the Israeli occupation forces. What the intifadas looked like, it was a cultivation of Palestinian demonstrations, boycotts, and attacks on Israelis. So, you know, you see a lot of rock throwing, a lot of boycotting of Israeli businesses, and so on. And the first Intifada saw the women of Palestine at the helm of the resistance. Like I mentioned before, the women in Palestine do hold a very big role in resisting the occupation for so many different reasons, whether them be like being medical staff, teachers, or, you know, going out and like, you know, fighting these like Israeli soldiers and being on the front lines of the resistance. And basically, because of all the protests and boycotts, this led Israel to sit down and negotiate, and this is what resulted in the signing of the Oslo Accords. So what were the Oslo Accords? The Oslo Accords was essentially an agreement that would work towards like another 2-state solution. So you see here the graph to the left, Area A would be fully under Palestinian control. And this is just in the sense of the West Bank. Okay, so this isn't even talking about like historic 48 Palestine. This is just the West Bank, or this isn't even talking about Gaza. So Area A would be under Palestinian control. We see that there. Area B would be joint Israeli and Palestinian control. And then Area C, which was a majority of it, would be under Israeli control. Yeah. Long story short, this didn't work. Israeli occupation is still everywhere in the West Bank, no matter where you are. There's not a safe place. So yeah. And then this is another sign when you walk that they will have posted outside of villages that are in like Area A areas, which are like fully Palestinian control. It says this road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden, dangerous to your lives, and is against the Israeli law. So basically saying that these are the Arab territories. They're dangerous for anyone to go into. And I'm not gonna lie, I went to Palestine for the first time this summer. And when I saw this sign, I was like, oh my God, like, wait, this is like actually real. It hit me. I was like, this is crazy. And if this doesn't show you that Israel is an apartheid state, I don't really know what will. So yeah. Moving on to the second Intifada, which was a lot more violent than the first. This took place from 2000 to 2005. And there basically the reason for this Intifada was also like rising tensions and lack of response from the Oslo. Israeli troops had not withdrawn from Palestinian territories. And then Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister at the time, threatens to take over Al-Aqsa Mosque and storms it with a bunch of Israeli soldiers. So this sparks another uprising. So between these 5 years, at least 4,973 Palestinians are killed. 3,400 are women, 1,262 are children, 274 are women, and 32 medical personnel are murdered. And then thousands are injured. This was a heavily militarized intifada, much more violent than the first. And this also resulted in the building of the apartheid wall. How this intifada ended was through a mutual agreement like ceasefire. So yeah. So this is kind of the this is the Intifada in pictures. Palestinian resistance was met with rubber bullets, you know, regular bullets, brutal beatings, resulting in the breaking of bones. So you could see there was a lot of rock throwing. You see this woman in the black dress. Again, women did play a very important role in resistance through, again, resisting the occupation and also education during these times. During the Intifadas, a lot of schools were shut down, and Palestinian women took it upon themselves to educate children in their own homes. And Palestinians still remain to be some of the most like educated people in the world, which is amazing. And then, yeah, you see another picture of a guy throwing a rock. And then you see a picture of the apartheid wall. This wall is huge and it divides Palestinian lands, making it hard for Palestinians to get to each other, Palestinians to go to their jobs. It divided like villages too. So there was some people on like from the same village on like one side of the wall, and then another people from the same village on like the other side of the wall. So yeah. And then you see this boy throwing a rock at a tank. This just shows you how militarized the Intifada was. This boy is throwing a rock, a small rock. Like I can't even see it in his hand in the picture. And then here you have a huge tank about to shoot at him. He does end up dying. His name was Faris Auda. If anyone wants to look more into his story. So yeah. And then obviously you do see a lot of Palestinian men and children at the forefront of this resistance too. The picture from the top to the left, the top left, you see a picture of a father and his son. This was during the second Intifada. And basically they were caught in like shooting. They ended up shooting his son. His name was Muhammad. And this was in Gaza during the second Intifada. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen the video of this. It's extremely sad. And it just shows you how extremely violent it was. They shot at everyone, they beat everyone. Yeah. And then to go into, this is my last segment of my portion, current life in Palestine. So what is life now like? I decided to convey this message through pictures because I think pictures speak louder than like just a bunch of statistics and words. So let's get into it. The top left, you see bulldozers demolishing Palestinian homes. And these bulldozers are Hyundai. So Hyundai, yes, like the car company that manufactures cars, they also manufacture bulldozers. That's why we should boycott them. Don't buy Hyundai cars. And then also Cat 2, the brand that you see that manufactures a bunch of like construction equipment. They also send bulldozers to Palestine to destroy homes. Home demolitions of Palestinian homes are very common. Usually, they will make you demolish your own home. Or if you don't want to do that, they will demolish it for you and then send you a bill and make you pay for it. And then below that picture, you have a picture of Razmia Auda. She was a victim of sexual violence in Israeli jails. And she was kind of, I don't want to say like the first woman to like publicly come out about it, but she was very vocal about what she had experienced in Israeli jails. Sexual violence in Israeli jails is still a very prevalent thing that is happening, and it happens to both men and women and children. For example, in Israeli jails, sometimes they will take nude pictures of women and then go and blackmail their husbands, their brothers, or their fathers into confessing, like, let's say, to a crime, and say, like, if you don't confess to your crime, we will, like, you know, like, we have your daughter's nude photos and we will use them as leverage. So that is a form of sexual violence. Women have been stripped naked. They have been beaten. They have been raped in Israeli jails, and this is still something that is happening till this day. It's not talked about as much because there's a lot of embarrassment and shame that comes with sexual violence that, you know, everyone has who has ever experienced that. But it's important that we talk about it because it's so unbelievably painful to hear about and sad. For example, men, they will sometimes make them wear dresses or make them wear skirts or make them wear women's clothing to demasculinize them, and so on. So yeah, she is obviously a strong Palestinian, you know, woman figure. And her name is Razmia Auda, if you're interested in looking more into her. The animated picture to the right is in 2021. It is in Sheikh Jarrah. I'm sure you guys have heard of Mohammed and Mona al-Kurd. They live in Sheikh Jarrah, which is a Palestinian neighborhood in Jerusalem that is at risk of being taken over by Israeli settlers, as all neighborhoods in Jerusalem are being at risk of this. And basically the settler from New York, his name is Jacob, I believe. He was in the al-Kurd family backyard, and there's this really popular video essentially of Mona being like, Jacob, like, why are you stealing my house? And then he repeats, if I don't steal it, someone else will. And he is a American born man who wants to steal this indigenous Palestinians' home. And it just kind of shows you how a lot of Israeli settlers in the West Bank are from America. So yeah, that is something that is not only, you know, singular to the al-Kurd family. This happens to a lot of other families of just settlers stealing homes. Specifically in Jerusalem, there is this high need to steal Palestinian homes because they want to make Jerusalem a Jewish city, a Jewish-only city. And yeah, it is absolutely crazy. And in Jerusalem, they will make up crazy rules where like they will go into your house, and if they see like a jug of milk not drinking, they'll be like, no one's living here. We're gonna take your home because this milk hasn't been drinking in 2 days. So there's kind of the sense where like if you live in East Jerusalem, you always need to be in your home, or there needs to be some type of proof that you live in your home, because they will make up the craziest excuses. Oh, this laundry hasn't been done. No one lives here. I'm going to take your house. They will go to crazy lengths to steal Palestinian homes. So yeah, moving on, the next picture, the top middle, you see settler violence backed by the Israeli military. So a lot of times you'll hear like, oh, it's not the lands. It's not the citizens, it's the military, or it's not the citizens, it's the government. No, it actually is the citizens. Settler violence is very big in Palestine. And essentially settlers could go and shoot any Palestinian. There will be no repercussions. And they actually do it with the backing of the government and with the backing of the Israeli military. So yeah, you could see that right there. Below that picture, you see a child being taken by the Israeli military. They take children, men, women, they don't discriminate, any Palestinian, Christian, Muslim, they don't care. You're discriminated against. The top, you see a kid named Ahmed Manasra. Yeah. And basically he has been in jail since he was like very young, 10, 11. And he's been in jail under solitary confinement, which is essentially illegal under international law. And it's essentially putting someone in prison and like not charging them for a crime, just keeping them in prison. So he has gone through a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse in these Israeli prisons, and he has a lot of mental health issues because of that, because he has quite literally grown up in Israeli prisons. Below that, you see a picture of a checkpoint. Palestinians have to go through routine checkpoints to get from point A to point B. Usually these checkpoints are very long. Palestinians can sometimes get killed at these checkpoints, or denied entry into wherever they're going, just depending on how that Israeli soldier feels that day and how they want to treat Palestinians. Below that, I kind of wanted to also symbolize a sense of Palestinian joy and culture, because although Palestinians are a oppressed community, we still hold so much joy in our lives and pride for being Palestinian. So to the far left, the bottom far left, you see a picture of Palestinian women on Christmas in Bethlehem, which is obviously the birthplace of Jesus. They're in their traditional Palestinian thobes, which is a Palestinian like dress wear. And the style is indigenous to Bethlehem. So every Palestinian city or village usually has its own style of tatriz, which is the Palestinian embroidery, which goes on these dresses essentially. Next to it, you see Eid prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Thousands of people come every Eid to pray. Again, just another symbol of resistance. Palestinians still going about their daily lives, even though they have to overcome all these obstacles. Even though a lot of people are denied entrance to Jerusalem, they still go and they still enjoy. And when I went to Al-Aqsa this summer, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I literally like started crying when I saw it. I was like, no way, I'm actually here, because it was my first time going. And just being there, the people are just so happy, and it's just so beautiful amidst all the genocides, the murders, and all the other stuff that go on. Next to that picture, you see a picture of Birzeit University, which is a very politically active university, even though they are raided by the Israeli army very often. Yeah, you know, Palestinians still go to college, they still go get their education. This is still important to them. So just another form of resistance, that even though all these obstacles are preventing them from doing certain things, they still try to live, you know, their daily lives. And then the picture right next to this was during the most recent prison exchange. This woman, her name is Isra. She was released from Israeli jails. I believe this is her son. She is like holding in her hands. She was burned in a car, I believe, and then thrown in jail, and she was just released and finally gets to live a life with her sons. Yeah, okay. And then this is my last, wait, actually, no, I have a couple more. And then just current life in Palestine continued. Like I mentioned, I went to Palestine this summer, so I kind of just wanted to share some of my own pictures that I took. This drawing on the top left is actually not my picture. But this also just shows life in Gaza. This picture was drawn by a child in Gaza, essentially depicting his trauma living in Gaza. Of course, this was pre 2023 genocide. And you could just see how like the children, how they cope with the Israeli siege on Gaza and so on. Moving on, the picture below that is a picture I took in Jenin, Palestine, in the Jenin refugee camp. I went back in July, August, and in June, Israeli forces had raided Jenin, and these were the martyrs that they had killed. If you don't know what like a martyr is, it's basically someone who like dies for a cause. So we consider all people who die at the hands of the Israeli occupation to be martyrs because they died for the Palestinian cause. Thus they will be, I guess, granted heaven. So yeah, these are the pictures of the martyrs. Very emotional, just that the kids were sitting there too. Yeah. Next to that, the top is another picture in Jenin. You could see they had gone and destroyed roads during the raids of June 2023. So this was just the road that they destroyed. Next to that picture, this was also in the Jenin refugee camp. You see bullet holes going through cement. If you don't know anything about the Jenin refugee camp, it is often raided, and its raids are very violent, resulting in a lot of like injuries, property damage, and murders. Below that, this is a picture of the Ibrahim Mosque in Hebron, or Khalil, as you would say it in Arabic. Um, a settler went in here 20 or so years ago. I think maybe even more. I don't know the correct year, but a settler went in here. A New York born settler went into the mosque and shot Palestinians at this mosque. And if you know anything about Hebron, it is it's very crazy because it's shared with like Palestinians and like settlers. So it's a very settler dense area in Palestine. So kind of these Palestinians and settlers live very closely amongst each other. So yeah, this New York born settler goes into this mosque and shoots Palestinians. It was very, very emotional. It was very, very sad. And you kind of you feel it like when you go into the mosque. So yeah. To the right side, the statue, if you will, of the key. This is a refugee camp in Bethlehem. And it is the most tear gas place in the world. So this key was actually built out of like old, like I don't even know how you would like describe it, but like I guess like tear gas like bombs or something like that. So they like repurposed them and then like made this. And the key symbolizes kind of like this right of return for Palestinians, because a lot of Palestinians who were exiled during the Nakba, they still hold the keys to their original home. And that key kind of symbolizes that we will return back to our original homes. So yeah. Below that picture is a picture of burned cars. I also went to a village in Ramallah called Tarmasaya this summer. And in June, at the end of June of 2023, Israeli settlers with the backing of the Israeli military, they went into this village, burned cars. They killed a man named Omar. He had a wife and two young boys. Omar was going into homes and helping like save, elderly and people in these homes that these settlers were attacking. And he was shot, resulting in his murder. And they burned cars, they threw tear gas into homes, and then proceeded to lock these homes so Palestinians would be trapped. So it was a very violent attack. And if you know anything about the village of Dun Masaya, there's a settlement called Shiloh. Literally, like when I went there, it's like a road that separates it. It's so close. They were able to just like essentially come down this road with the backing of the Israeli military, and perform these attacks. So yeah. Okay. My last slide, sorry. So kind of going over the School of Public Health and UIC's complicity in the Israeli occupation and UIC's complicity in everything that is going on in Palestine right now. I'm specifically going to focus on the School of Public Health. But UIC has partnerships with a lot of weapons manufacturers like Woodward. They also have partnership with CAT, which, as I mentioned previously, bulldozes Palestinian homes. So UIC does have a lot of ties to what is happening in Palestine right now. And since we're SJP, one of our jobs is we do fight that and we do run campaigns against that. And of course, follow us on Instagram, SJP at UIC, for a lot more information. But specific to the School of Public Health, the School of Public Health holds a contract with the Jewish United Fund, which is a Zionist organization. And I don't know if you remember, but I had mentioned them previously. They have been stealing Palestinian lands since the beginning of the 1900s. Administration refuses to terminate this contract with the JUF. They said that they appreciates the cultural diversity it brings to the school, which is ethnic cleansing and genocide, if that is what you consider cultural diversity, which is crazy. And back in 2021, they brought in a visiting Israeli scholar to talk about COVID-19 vaccine distribution in Palestine. SJP at the time, they reached out to admin and said this event is racist, and admin didn't do anything about it, and they let the event continue. And when Palestinian students joined, they were muted and they were removed from the Zoom call when they asked questions about Palestinian healthcare, and so on. So this JUF contract still exists, and we are still trying to get them to terminate it. But it is clear that administration doesn't want to terminate it at all. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hand it off to my partner, who is going to go over health structures.
Hello, everyone.
Actually, hi. Sorry to interrupt. Would this be a good time for like a 3-minute break?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We're just gonna take a 3-minute break, everyone. So get water or snack or stretch your legs. We'll come back at 6:33.
Thanks for taking the break, everyone. Feel free, SJP, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about structures of health inequity in Palestine. So first things first, introduction of Public Health and the Promise of Palestine by Dania Kato. Is a pharmacist, epidemiologist, and a health services researcher. And in this essay, she contextualizes the special collection of papers on the pandemic, and she aims to outline the existing public health research on Palestine and the Palestinians. And this is just like an excerpt from this article. And if you are interested in reading for more information, I really recommend you do so. So Palestinians in Gaza who live under tough conditions where basic needs like water and medicine are controlled by the Israeli military face high stress levels, and they are also known to be linked to early death. In the West Bank, the local government, which is also controlled by Israel, doesn't have the final decision on health rules. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, Palestinian workers had to ignore their government's quarantine rules. And the Oslo Accords allowed Israel to keep control over Palestinian health systems while freeing them from responsibilities as an occupier. And so the Paris Protocol created a situation where Palestine is dependent on Israeli medicine. And so Israel also holds back more than 1 billion USD in taxes from Palestine every year, a big amount considering Palestine's total income is $4.6 billion. So Dania encourages researchers to question standard research methods and avoid actions that stop political practice. It's important to look at not just the data, but also who has control over health results, their meaning, and how they're measured. Despite human rights groups working hard to record Israel's wrongdoings against Palestinians, these problems seem to continue. Israel continues to control the resources that they distribute to Palestine, health resources that they distribute. And this is largely due to geographic fragmentation and movement restrictions rooted in settler colonialism. And in the United States, the emphasis on quantifying differences due to racial capitalism fails to link outcomes to the structures of slavery and settler colonialism. And this leads to further marginalization of Black and Indigenous people. So researchers must acknowledge the inseparability of material and political conditions and consider the structures of violence that impact the health system. So before I start talking about this, I really want to define what settler colonialism is. So settler colonialism represents a distinct type of colonialism that functions through the replacement of indigenous population with an invasive settler society that over time develops an identity that is inherently borrowed from those who are indigenous. Or I should say stolen, not borrowed. So indigenous people in places like America, Australia, the Western Sahara, Algeria, South Africa, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and in Palestine often have shorter lives, suffer more severe illnesses, and have higher death rates. And this is related to settler colonialism, the power structure that affects health. And the authors question the heavy reliance on data to show the usefulness of a settler colonial framework. And they suggest that the data has often been used to oppress the current research methods. What? Sorry. Sorry, 1 second. So authors critique reliance on data alone, improving the utility of a settler colonial framework when data has been used as a tool of oppression, and many metrics and incentives in research are tools of oppression that do not clarify or address inequity. So while many health current theories like eco-social theories and structural racism are broad in scope, they may miss some insights that settler colonial theory provides. And this theory explains how discrimination and racism are deeply rooted in our laws, in our schools and society, and they often have they've remained from colonial times. And some say that theories don't pinpoint the root of the problem clearly, but settler colonial theory can add clarity. It helps differentiate between the past and now, and it links health problems to current unfair treatment. For example, in Palestine, this theory can explain the health impacts of denied COVID-19 vaccines, injuries from bombings, forced births at checkpoints, collective punishment and starvation, trauma from violence, and ongoing stress. So a crucial aspect of settler colonialism in Israel is the existence of two separate legal systems for Israelis and Palestinians. Palestinians are tried in military courts, while Israelis are tried in civil courts, even for the same crime. And this dual system is a stark manifestation of racialized narratives of superiority mentioned in the selected text. Israel is the only country in the world that systematically prosecutes minors in military courts and accepts confessions obtained through coercion. And this exacerbates the health and social inequalities faced by the Palestinian population. And so the authors here provide three key arguments for adoption of the framework. The first being settler colonialism should be conceptualized as a structure rather than an event. And it's not just a one-time event, but it's something that shapes how society and politics impact our health. The second being modern racialization is the result of colonial hierarchies. And the third being structural racism methodologies are already beginning to incorporate linking settler colonialism and health, drawing the connection between decolonization and improved health outcomes. So with that being said, this is how the settler colonial theory inherently is practiced on the ground. So the healthcare infrastructure in Gaza, this is mostly before October 7th. So one of the most significant aspects of how Israel exercises its power is through the continual erosion of Gaza's rehabilitative infrastructure. And the high number of injuries that resulted from the Great March of Return, which happened in 2018 and 2019. I will be talking more about that in the next slide. Have put an immense pressure on Gaza's already strained health systems and further weakened its economy. Israeli control over life-saving infrastructures has compounded the problem, and this is evident through the crisis where the targeting of health workers significantly obstructed the provision of emergency aid. And in general, the issue of patient referrals presents another challenge. Since these referrals are largely dependent on Israeli permits, many life-saving treatments are often either denied or delayed, which further exacerbates the health crisis in Gaza. So many patients, many cancer patients who cannot receive the required care in Gaza, sometimes when they apply for permits to receive care in the West Bank, they are often denied by Israel. So Israel controls the movement of Palestinians between Gaza and the West Bank, and inherently, even if Palestinians are sick and dying and need the care that they cannot get in Gaza, are completely denied. And so from 2018 to 2019, the Great March of Return resulted in a significant spike in public health issues with over 35,000 Palestinians being injured. Leading to another significant strain on the region's health services. The majority of these injuries were gunshot injuries to the limbs, which accounted for 80% of all cases. The World Health Organization reported that these events resulted in 149 amputations and 24 cases of paralysis due to spinal cord injuries, and more than 1,000 of the injured Palestinians, many of whom are underage, required limb reconstruction. And this situation created a long-term public health issue as it significantly impacted the public health landscape within Gaza. And the use of high velocity ammunition in the conflict in the Great March of Return led to unusually large and destructive bullet wounds. And this further complicated treatment and recovery and resulted in permanent hearing impairment, organ loss, and the inability to have children for many of the injured. And these conditions contributed to an escalating public health crisis in the region again. And Israel's military tactics during this period have been heavily criticized for creating a disabled generation of Palestinians. And the severity of the injuries, coupled with the ongoing siege on Gaza, significantly hampered the ability of health services to adequately respond to the crisis. So again, the long-term erosion of Gaza's rehabilitation infrastructure is an essential part of Israel's exercise of power. And the number of injuries during the Great March of Return has put a strain on the health infrastructure and Gaza's economy. Health workers, including paramedics and doctors, have been targeted during this, leading to the obstruction of vital emergency assistance. And the influx of injured patients has overwhelmed Gaza's health system. So this was 2018 to 2019. And as a result of the Great March of Return, it takes Gaza a long time to rebuild infrastructure because of the siege on Gaza. Israel does limit the resources, the supplies, the things that they need to improve well-being for Palestinians in Gaza, whether they are sick or not even. So because Israel has so much control over what goes in and out of the region, they also have control of what resources Palestinians get. And sometimes it's not enough to rebuild the infrastructure after events like the Great March of Return occur. And so that leads me to talk about public health in Gaza today. At least 62,000 people have been wounded in the Israeli assault on Gaza. The UN has said that there are famine-like conditions in Gaza, as around 1 in 4 of the population of 2.3 million people face extreme hunger. And as of today, at least 20,840 people have been killed, more than 12,000 children and 8,000 women have been killed. More than 67,000 Palestinians have been injured, including at least around 8,000 children and around 6,000 women. And there are more than 7,000 missing under the rubble, lost, and cannot be found. So right now, Gaza is facing a very indeed like public health issue. This is a public health crisis. Ambulances, there are less than 6 ambulances running as of now. The last standing hospital shut down just last week, so no hospitals are running in Gaza right now. So those who are injured cannot receive any type of care. Many people are getting different types of rashes on their skin and symptoms because of the digesting dirty water, because they don't have access to clean water or food. So this is, like I said, Israel does control the aid that goes into Gaza. And right now, amidst the ongoing genocide, Israel does not have, Palestinians don't have the resources or the materials or anything they're needed to rebuild. So yeah, it's really sad. And this is why talking about this is so important, especially talking about public health in Gaza today. And so right now, Palestinians are much more likely to suffer from PTSD and depression than the global average and their neighboring countries. The global prevalence of depression and PTSD are 5% and 3.6% respectively. The prevalence of severe PTSD in children living in the Gaza Strip is 32.7%. And furthermore, depression in Palestine is among the highest rates in the world, affecting 40% of Palestinians.
So this leads us to our last slide. What is the world we want to see built? Very simply, we said a free and liberated Palestine from the river to the sea. And I guess now this is a good time for us to take questions.
Thank you for that presentation. It was great. I know we all learned so much. I know there was a couple questions I got that we could start with. And if anyone would like to come off beat to ask a question, you could raise your hand. But I'll start with this one we got about one of the earlier slides with the maps. Is Trump's projected plan on the 6-day war slide the current distribution of land, or was that what he planned?
Well,
Let's go back to the map. One more, I think a couple more. Okay. Okay, so Trump's projected plan, I guess in short, like
I feel like they took more land since 2020.
yeah, I think like this should honestly probably more be titled like projected now, like projected land like in the present. Obviously Trump like supports Israel, but there wasn't like, I don't know. I feel like the title is like, it doesn't fit like with the map. But basically what I was trying to show in the map is like what is Palestinian land now, and then what is Israeli land now, if we want to compare it from historic Palestine to 2020, which is like present day.
Also, because settler attacks in the West Bank are ongoing, so like the map also like changes like every year. Like if there's a new settler village in the West Bank, that's another city of settlers added to the map. More Palestinian land gets taken every year. So this is just to like show like kind of like put things into perspective a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, but I guess essentially to answer your question, the Trump's projected plan, I don't know why it's titled that. It should just be more titled like land grab today, I
Yeah.
guess. But I mean, Trump did move the Israeli embassy from Tel Aviv. I mean, the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And maybe that title came out from that, because usually when an embassy is like in a country's capital, it just like reaffirms Jerusalem as being the capital of Israel, because US moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, basically saying like, oh yeah, like is Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, I guess. Just another fact.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree, someone said it's very interesting about the embassy being moved. Okay, let me look at another one. This one is kind of 3 questions. But it's, could there ever be a secular state that respects people of all religions, as well as atheists, so no religion, from the river to the sea. Would that be a good outcome? And how does racial capitalism affect possible solutions to this struggle? So that's kind of a big three questions, but whatever your thoughts are.
Yeah, I do see that like a settler a secular state can exist from the river to the sea that includes all people from all faiths. And I just want to do mention that like Palestine like holds a very like diversely like faithful group of people. We have people who believe in Islam, people who believe in Christianity, as well as Jewish Palestinians did exist before like 1948, and we all kind of coexisted together for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and as well as other people like we also have different sects of each religion that like people who are in those sects also existed in Palestine before 1948. And so that the issue at hand isn't a religious conflict. I really do want to like preface that by saying it's not a religious conflict. And settler colonialism, the settler colonial state of Israel is inherently the issue here, because Palestinians who are indigenous to this land have been kicked off of their home, like kicked out of their homes and have been displaced. And so it's not because of their religion that they are displaced. It's because of their identity as a Palestinian. And I hope that answers your question, but I do believe that from the river to the sea, a secular state with all people from all faiths can be free in this country of Palestine.
I also want to add, like when we talk about the Palestinian identity, I think it's important to talk about how the Palestinian identity is many identities. Historically, like pre-48, and for hundreds of years, people found refuge in Palestine. During the Armenian genocide, you see an influx of Armenian refugees coming to Palestine. There's even a Armenian quarter in Jerusalem, because of how many Armenians, went there for refuge. So I want to emphasize that, like, there was never an issue of like people coming into Palestine and like integrating into like the culture and like the communities. The issue here is settler colonialism. The issue here is the Nakba. It's when they came in, they were militarized and they kicked thousands of people out of their homes and still do that till this day. When Algerians came to Palestine to flee the French occupation, they didn't kick Palestinians out of their homes. They simply were integrated into the culture and the community and became like Palestinian, essentially, nationally like Palestinian, even though like I guess technically Palestine didn't really exist as like a nation during that time. It was just lands, but that's maybe another topic in itself, is like borders and where that all came from. But yeah, the issue here is settler colonialism. And then if you don't mind repeating the question about racial capitalism.
Yes, so it was, how does racial capitalism affect possible solutions to this struggle?
Okay, I think, so under the settler colony of Israel, Palestinians are now integrated into the settler colonial state. And under the settler colonial states, they have restrictions like checkpoints, where they can go, where they can work, who they could work for. And even their jobs are limited because of racism. They can't get the same jobs. Let's say Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, they can't necessarily get the same jobs as their Israeli, Jewish counterparts because of that like racial divide. So in Palestine a lot, you have a lot of Palestinians, let's say, in the West Bank, illegally crossing borders and going into 1948 territory to illegally work for Israeli settlers for very, very cheap. And now these Israeli settlers, and just to, sorry, give you a depiction, 48 is like this white territory that you see right here. So this is the West Bank, the green territory, the white territory is 48, or historic Palestine, as we would say. So you have these Palestinians in the West Bank illegally crossing into Israeli territory to work for, let's say, Israeli Jewish settlers, who now kind of have like this leverage over these Palestinian people who are working for them because they're doing it illegally. And if they report these Palestinians to the state, who's going to get in trouble? Well, not the Israeli that's employing this Palestinian, the Palestinian's going to get in trouble. So I think that gives you a sense of like this racial capitalism in Israeli society, how like honestly, I feel like I'm currently taking an African American history class. And if you know anything about African American history and segregation, and essentially how Black people had to fight for their liberation within like this white supremacist state, it's kind of very similar to how Palestinians are fighting under like settler colonialism, kind of that same sense. I don't know if that answers your question or if you're asking something completely different, but if there needs more clarification, let me know.
No, I think that was great. And I think we have time for one more, and I got another in the chat that I think a lot of people probably would like to talk about is with Joe Biden and Donald Trump's stances, how would someone who is trying to advocate on behalf of Palestine approach this upcoming presidential election?
That's a really, really good question. I think because we are like influenced to believe, I guess, like the country, like only a two-party system. This country only works under a two-party system, and that we should, choose the lesser of two evils. But at this point, like, what does that really mean? I don't think there is such a thing as a less of two evils. So I really I think that this upcoming election is going to see a large number of third-party voters. And I do believe that it's really important to vote and exercise your right to vote. And I think that it's maybe time to explore other parties that exist, other parties that also go up against the Democrats and the Republicans. And maybe we don't have to run under a two-party system. And if we want to practice our democratic right, it's really important that we vote and research and learn more about our political leaders that represent the people, right? And right now, President Biden is not representing the American people when around 60 to 70% of Americans are saying yes to a ceasefire. And so I really encourage you kind of look outside think outside the box, look outside the scope of just a two-party system. And maybe if we really want to enact change, practice your democratic right, and look at other parties that are maybe more likely to represent you.
I also wanted to add to that. I feel like when we think of election, we think of like, oh, presidency and stuff like that. But it's really important that you guys are pushing your representatives and senators to support Palestine, whether that be calling them or not voting them in for the next upcoming election. I think our senators and our representatives, like they do also hold a lot of power in the White House. And if your representative doesn't support Palestine, we don't vote for you. We don't support any politician who doesn't support Palestine. So voting is very important. And like Lena said, Like, I know we're, you know, Trump versus Biden. Me personally, I know I'm going to vote for third party. But I think it's also important to vote in our primaries. I mean, in our elections for our like representatives and stuff. And yeah, and I know voting can sometimes seem like, sorry, one more thing, because I'm turning 21 in March, and I literally just registered to vote because I always had that viewpoint that voting is pointless. No matter who I vote for, it's going to be like the lesser of two evils or stuff like that. But you know, everything that has happened has really kind of changed my perspective a little bit, because I think we should really advocate for Palestinian liberation in all aspects and through voting, even though it might seem pointless, because at the end of the day, like, you know, the United States is such a big supporter of Israel, but there is ways to get our message across through that angle, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Students for Justice in Palestine. And thank you everyone for your great questions, for staying a little later. I think this, I know it encouraged me to go out and read and learn more. We put in the comments, Emily put in the comment a link to SJP's calls to action. I also know they're having their annual Apartheid Week starting the 19th. So lots to engage with. So this will be the end of the big session. For students taking the course for credit, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And in that time, I'll put us all in our breakout room. And yeah, for the rest of you, thank you again so much. Next week, we'll be having an action lab about building a campaign on politicized topics. And we hope to see many of you there. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This was really cool and amazing. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming. Thanks, everyone.